My name is Ethan Harris. I'm 31 years old, and I've been working as a food delivery driver in Forest Ridge, a small town near the edge of some pretty thick woods. It's a peaceful place most of the time, but some nights it can feel a bit eerie, especially when you get those late-night orders from way out in the middle of nowhere. Last night was one of those nights, and I'll never forget what happened. It was around 11 p.m., and I was about to call it quits for the night when I got a notification for a delivery. The address was a remote cabin deep in the woods, a good 20-minute drive outside of town. The instructions were strange. Delivered to the basement door. I'm having a party downstairs. I hesitated for a second, but figured it was just another weird order. I mean, I've had my fair share of strange requests, like delivering pizza to someone while they were in a treat house or dropping off food to a garage during a car repair. This was just another odd one, right? So I accepted the order and headed out. The drive was quiet, with the moon barely lighting up the winding road. As I got deeper into the woods, the air felt heavier, the trees thicker, and the only sound was the crunch of gravel under my tires. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, but I kept telling myself it was just the late hour playing tricks on my mind. Finally, I reached the cabin. It was old, with peeling paint and broken shutters, sitting in the middle of a clearing surrounded by thick woods. No lights were on, except for a dim glow coming from the basement window. I parked the car and grabbed the food. The basement door was slightly open, just like the instructions said. I stood there for a moment, debating whether I should just leave the food and go. But something pulled me in, curiosity or maybe a sense of duty. I walked up to the door, pushed it open, and stepped inside. The air was musty, and the basement smelled like damp wood. As I descended the creaky stairs, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. There was no party. No music, no voices, just silence. Then I saw her. A woman, maybe in her mid-30s, chained to the far wall. Her face was bruised, eyes wide with terror, and she had a gag in her mouth. For a moment, I froze, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. This wasn't some prank. This was real. My heart started racing as I realized I had walked right into a hostage situation. I moved quickly but quietly, rushing over to her. She was shaking, trying to say something through the gag. I pulled it off and whispered, "I'm here to help. We need to get out of here." Her eyes filled with tears, and she nodded. I started fumbling with the chains, trying to figure out how to free her when I heard the sound that made my blood run cold. Heavy footsteps upstairs. Someone was in the cabin, and they were coming down. The woman's eyes widened in fear, and I knew we didn't have much time. I spotted a small storage closet near the stairs and hurried her inside. "Stay quiet," I whispered before closing the door, leaving just enough of a crack to peek through. The footsteps grew louder, and then I saw him. A tall man, broad-shouldered, with a face that looked like it had seen too many fights. He was holding a knife in one hand and a flashlight in the other, scanning the basement as if he were looking for something or someone. "Where are you, sweetheart?" He called out, his voice low and menacing. "I know you're down here." I held my breath, praying he wouldn't notice us. He paced around, checking corners and looking behind old furniture. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it might give us away. After what felt like an eternity, he turned toward the stairs. "I'll be back. Don't worry," he said with a sickening grin before heading back upstairs. The door slammed shut, and the basement was silent again. I waited a few minutes to make sure he was gone before I opened the closet. The woman was trembling, but she nodded, ready to move. I helped her out of the chains and guided her up the stairs as quietly as possible. Every step felt like it might be our last, but somehow we made it to the front door without him hearing us. We ran through the woods, not stopping until we reached a nearby gas station. There, we called the police. They arrived within minutes, and I told them everything that had happened. The woman was taken to the hospital, and I gave a statement. But here's the thing. When the police went to the cabin, the man was gone. No trace of him, not even a footprint. They found bloodstains in the basement, but that was it. The woman told the police that the man had kidnapped her weeks ago and had been keeping her in that basement ever since. The man was never caught. He just disappeared into the woods. Now, every time I drive by that part of town, I get chills. My name is Kevin Daniels. I'm 28 years old, and I've been working as a food delivery driver in the small town of Redmond, Oregon, for about 2 years. The job's pretty straightforward. Deliver the food, get the tip, and move on to the next order. But one night, a routine delivery turned into the most terrifying experience of my life. It was a Friday night, around 10 p.m., when I got the order. The address was on the outskirts of town, somewhere I'd never been before. The instructions were a little odd. Leave food in the backyard. Most people just want it left at the front door, but I didn't think much of it. It was late, and I figured maybe the customer didn't want to be disturbed. The drive out there took me down a long, winding road, the kind where the streetlights are few and far between. As I got closer, the houses became more spread out, the streets darker. Finally, I arrived at the address. My heart sank the moment I saw the place. The house looked abandoned. The front yard was overgrown with weeds, and the windows were dark, some even boarded up. The paint on the house was peeling, and the whole place had a decayed, forgotten look. For a moment, I thought about just leaving the food in the car and driving away, but the customer had already paid online, and I didn't want to risk a bad rating. I got out of the car, grabbed the bag of food, and made my way around to the backyard. My flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing a dilapidated shed in the far corner. That's when I noticed something strange. On the ground, leading from the back of the house to the shed, were dark stains. At first, I thought it was oil or mud, but as I got closer, I realized it wasn't. It was blood. My stomach twisted. This was way beyond what I signed up for. I should have turned around right then and there, but something compelled me to keep going, a mix of fear and curiosity. The shed door was slightly open, and I could hear faint rustling from inside. I took a few steps closer, heart pounding in my chest, and pointed my flashlight at the entrance. What I saw made my blood run cold. Inside the shed, on the floor, were more bloodstains, fresh ones. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Was this some kind of sick joke? Who orders food to a place like this? Then I heard it, a soft creak from behind me. I whipped around, shining my flashlight toward the house. My breath caught in my throat. In the second-floor window, partially hidden behind a tattered curtain, was a figure. Someone was watching me. I didn't stay to get a better look. Panic surged through me as I bolted for my car. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely get the keys into the ignition. As I sped away, I glanced back at the house, but the figure was gone. I didn't stop driving until I reached a gas station back in town. My hands were still trembling as I dialed 911, explaining what I had seen: the blood, the shed, the figure in the window. The dispatcher assured me that they would send someone to check it out. I didn't sleep that night, my mind replaying everything I had witnessed over and over again. The next morning, I woke up to a flood of messages and calls. I turned on the news, and there it was, a breaking story about the house I had delivered to. Police had found a body in the shed, the remains of a missing person who had been reported weeks earlier. The house itself had been vacant for years. The figure I saw. There were no reports of anyone living there, and the police found no signs of anyone in the house. Whoever or whatever I had seen that night was never found. I quit my job a week later. Every time I think about that night, I wonder what would have happened if I had stayed a little longer, if I had gone into that shed, or if the figure in the window had come outside. Some nights, I still wake up drenched in sweat. The image of that house and the blood-stained ground burned into my memory. My name is Megan Taylor, and I'm 24 years old. I've been working as a food delivery driver for the past few months here in Brookfield, a quiet suburban town where nothing really happens. It's a simple job, and I like the freedom of driving around, listening to music, and delivering food. But after what happened last week, I'm not sure if I'll ever feel safe doing it again. It was a Tuesday night, around 9 p.m., when I got the order. The instructions were odd. No contact delivery. Leave the food on the porch. Do not knock or ring the bell. It wasn't the first time I'd had such an order, but something about this one felt off from the start. The house was in a part of town I didn't recognize, on a street that wasn't on my usual route. As I drove down the narrow road, the houses became farther apart, and the neighborhood seemed darker than usual. When I finally reached the address, a chill ran down my spine. The house stood in the middle of an overgrown yard, the grass long and unkempt. The windows were covered by heavy curtains, and the porch light was off, making the entire place feel abandoned. It didn't seem like anyone had lived there for a while, yet here I was, with a bag of food in my hands. I parked the car and grabbed the order. As I walked up the cracked driveway, my footsteps echoed in the silence. Everything felt too quiet. No sounds of cars, no wind, not even crickets. Just this eerie stillness that made me want to get the job done and leave as fast as I could. I reached the porch and placed the bag down, but then I noticed something that made my heart skip a beat. The front door was slightly open, just enough for me to see inside. I froze, unsure of what to do. My gut told me to turn around and leave, but curiosity got the better of me. I leaned forward, peering through the crack. Inside, the hallway was dimly lit, but I could make out the outline of a figure lying on the floor. At first, I thought it was someone asleep, but something about the way they were positioned didn't look right. Their body was twisted, and as my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I saw it, the pool of blood spreading from their head. I gasped, stumbling back, my breath catching in my throat. Panic surged through me, and I turned to run back to my car. My hands were shaking as I fumbled for my keys, desperate to get out of there. That's when I heard it, a soft whisper coming from the open door. "Thank you for the delivery." I whipped around, heart pounding in my chest. The voice was calm, almost polite, but it chilled me to the bone. I couldn't see anyone in the doorway now, just the empty hallway and that body on the floor. Terrified, I jumped into my car and sped off, not daring to look back. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of what I had just seen. Who was that voice? Was it coming from the body, or was someone else inside the house? None of it made any sense. I drove straight home, locking all the doors and windows, trying to calm down. I wanted to call the police, but what would I even say? That I delivered food to a house with a dead body inside, that someone whispered to me from the shadows, it sounded insane. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something horrible had just happened. The next morning, I finally worked up the courage to check the local news, hoping for some kind of explanation. My heart sank when I saw the headline. Asterisk body found in abandoned house. Murder investigation underway. Asterisk. The article didn't give much detail, just that the house had been vacant for months and that a body had been discovered inside by a concerned neighbor. No mention of a food delivery. No mention of the whisper I'd heard. But I knew what I saw, and I knew what I heard. I quit my delivery job the next day. I couldn't shake the memory of that whisper, the way it seemed to come from nowhere. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder who or what was inside that house. Was it a ghost? A killer? Or something even worse? All I know is that I'll never go back to that neighborhood again. Some deliveries just aren't worth the risk.